Hey, and welcome back to the Happy Horse Nutrition Podcast and part 2 of our 2-part series on joints and joint supplements. If you haven't yet listened to part 1, I'd really suggest you do that first so you have proper context for part 2. And if you have already listened to part 1, let's jump right on back in. We pick up the conversation talking about the second part of Professor Brian Nielsen and his grad student Renee Harbowy's research into commonly fed joint supplements that uses sheep as models for equine osteoarthritis. And we finish with a detailed look at what best practice management for joint health actually looks like, including a suggestion to lunge yourself to feel how it feels on your own joints. Such a cool idea. I have to admit this conversation really opened my eyes to what we as horse owners will be missing if we are relying on joint supplements to protect joints versus relying on proper nutrition and management. Ready for round 2? Let's get back into it. So there was a second part to this study that I want to move on to now, and it involved sheep. And you would have laughed if you saw me giggling at the fact that you had sheep and training in the same sentence because typically you don't train sheep. But and my dad was a shearer, so I've spent a lot of time with sheep in my lifetime, and they've frustrated me to my wits' end trying to move them without a dog because they're so very hard. But Brian, can you just talk us through why sheep?
Because I want to be an Aussie. Because I want to be like you, Nerida. That's why we have sheep.
We do have the best sheep. This is a complete aside and not related to anything, but my brother is a professor of meat science at the University of New England, which is my university, and you know Pete and Brian. And they just had a bunch of US students out here for the intercollegiate meat judging. And I heard an interview on a radio with one of the US students talking about how much better lamb is in Australia compared to what she gets in Texas. So it's so gamey over there because our lamb, I'm sure I fed you lamb when you were in Australia, Brian, but our lamb is just to die for. So anyway, we love to eat sheep here. Apparently you guys like to train them.
Yes. Well, when you ask why sheep, the answer is because they exercise better than calves. Because we'd actually been doing a bunch of research using calves as a model for horses, and calves work great for sprint exercise. And so we did some really cool research regarding bone, and I know you're very aware of that stuff regarding sprinting calves and how it takes very little sprinting, but it takes some to make bone strong. Then we started doing circular exercise and having calves like on a high-speed walker, getting to walk for any length of time or trot for any length of time on a circle. They just thought that was really stupid. Sheep, on the other hand, were
so
like,
they would just stop. They wouldn't do it.
Oh, the calves? Yeah, they were just like, okay, no, we're just not going any farther. Again, they would love sprinting. Sprinting was easy, but the long duration stuff. But we ended up doing some work with sheep, and sheep, as long as they're in their flock, and somebody else is going forward, they tend to exercise pretty good. So Renee was actually involved with some circular exercise, sheep, and when she was doing the circular exercise with the sheep, one of the things that we were very surprised to find is in this group of sheep, regardless of whether they were exercising in a circle on a high-speed walker or on a high-speed treadmill, because we do that with sheep too, or not exercising at all, they all had lots of joint lesions. And we were really surprised by that. Renee presented a couple of years ago at our Equine Science Society Symposium, this one paper, was just these incidental findings. I'm going to give you a shout out. She won some awards with that paper at a horse meeting with sheep. And it was stuff that we accidentally found. And that's what's really fun about research sometimes is you're doing something and you find something you did not expect to find. But what we realized is hey, we have this model and we've repeated it now in a number of studies where this group of sheep that we have, and as horse people listening to this, the sheep grow really fast. The sheep are in a low copper diet because sheep can't handle high copper. And their genetics are such that it seemed like these were all factors that would fit into developing joint lesions. And of course, when we're talking about supplements and joint supplements, lesions are one of the big issues. Now, sheep may not be the perfect model for evaluating joint supplements because we knew this going in there. They are ruminants. And so, does it all get digested and broken down and not actually absorbed intact? And it looks like that's the case. Um, but one of the interesting things is these supplements are being sold to everybody, not just horse people are getting suckered in. We found where they're being sold specifically to people who have show sheep or show
Uh,
goats
yeah,
because they
right.
have these same lameness issues.
Yeah, yeah.
And the people that are in that show world, I mean, they're spending a lot of money on their animals. I have a friend who's a veterinarian who's worked in Thailand with elephants, and the company whose product we tested, they were giving they initially gave them some of this product for them to use on their elephants to help with their joint problems. Um, they quit using it because one, a they didn't see it making any difference, and the other thing is you got to give a lot of it to an elephant because they are a little bit bigger than a horse, and it was very expensive to do so. Um, but it is also being marketed again for these other animals where it probably actually won't even be able to be absorbed intact. But we thought, okay, well, let's just go ahead and check it out to see if maybe magically it gets in there. And we can also gather more information on all these joint lesions that we see because we think we really have a very interesting model because fast growth, low copper in diets, and genetics all seem to be things that we think lead into osteochondrotic lesions with our horses. We seem to be seeing a similar thing with our sheep, and so gathering more information. So I just wanted to be an Aussie. Um, so
You've
these other
you've
things are just byproducts.
you've raced cows and now you've trained sheep. And actually, if anyone does want to go back and listen to, I think it's podcast number 4 on the Happy Horse Nutrition podcast, is an interview with Brian talking about 30 years of research into bone health, and it's such good work. You really do need to go, and it's been really popular. Brian has had lots and lots of listens, so hopefully it's getting the
Super.
information out there because it's counterintuitive. What is actually wonderful for bone is what a lot of people think is not great for bone. So on bone health, go and grab that podcast. But what did you find in the sheep? What were the results of that study?
So, like he mentioned, it doesn't really appear that this supplement can be absorbed by these sheep, but that's a pretty important thing to learn, and it lets us know that maybe there's a need for a pharmacodynamic study in the future. Now that the product we used is, to also elaborate on his point, it's not necessarily that the company or the company of the product that we used is marketing towards ruminants, but you can go onto a lot of online forums and people are using this off label because you can get it from Chewy or Amazon or the feed store. It's everywhere and you don't need a veterinarian. It's very unlikely to cause harm, as we've discussed as well. So people, get it and try it, and anecdotal evidence says it's great. There are also some ruminant specific products that are out there. However, they don't have any indication that they have been tested or are rumen protected. So I would be suspicious if they would work any better. But that's like one way I think this is going to build. But um, these sheep absolutely do still have these lesions that we expected to see. So it's really just interesting to kind of see those there again. And then we have a few more sheep studies coming up that I think we're just going to keep kind of looking more into these lesions, seeing if they keep showing up, and hopefully get some work published that can get the ball rolling on figuring out what these might be. I always joke that I love using sheep as a model, but I am not a sheep person. I had a few undergrads. And one of my studies were we're exercising sheep on this treadmill, and while I will say that it is meant to be a high speed treadmill, these sheep are not traveling at high speeds. Just to throw that out there. They're doing like some light trotting, if you will. Um, but I had one of my undergrads ask me, she's like, "Did you always know that you wanted to research sheep?" And I was like, "That's actually like not what I'm doing now, technically." So Um,
I'm
there's
working
a
with
couple
sheep now.
things that I'm like, it's very interesting now, and I would love to gather this data and hand it off to somebody who's really passionate about sheep joints, which
Mm,
would be
mm.
really great.
It
Um,
would be it would be so interesting to know, because a lot of my career has been spent on thoroughbred breeding farms, like lots and lots of time working with thoroughbred breeding farms here in Australia, a lot in Japan as well, a little bit in the US, and something that we're so focused on with these young horses is getting them to grow in a way that they build a healthy joint surface to start with, so they don't start out with a diseased joint surface. And, it's well known, and I see it in a very practical sense as well, that the faster they grow, the more prone they are to joint lesions. And, when we have really lush seasons out here, we have lots and lots of joint issues. When we have drought and we can control their feeding very well, then we have very, very few lesions. So there's definitely something around growth. And lambs, they grow like crazy. They grow so fast, depending on the type of lamb. So it'd be so fascinating to look into that.
And I should throw in a few more reasons regarding the real reasons why we use sheep. And again, wouldn't it be great to do all of our work, for instance, like with thoroughbred racehorses, young ones? Uh, One, they tend to cost a little bit more than the sheep do, so that's a logistical thing. Um, we try to ignore the money aspect, even though that's a real issue. But then the other beautiful thing is we have very similar sheep that we get to use. And so when we go ahead and assign them to a treatment group, we are really certain that the ones in this group are really similar in age and everything else and breeding, similar
Mm-hmm.
genetics um, to
Mm-hmm.
the ones in the other group. And in fact, she has some work coming up that we're going to be starting, guess next month actually, where we're even looking at having like, twins, one go into one group and the other go into the other to have even that much more
Oh, yeah.
stuff that we
Yeah,
could not
wow.
do with horses. And then the final aspect of it, and this is what started out with the calf work initially many years ago, is we have indirect measurements of how much bone is there. But often when we're looking at our racehorses, which you mentioned, we're looking at how strong is that bone. The only way you
Mm.
can really tell is to do bone breaking strength. And so back with those studies, we used juvenile bull calves. They were destined for the food chain anyway. So they got to exercise and have some fun before they ended up. And then we could actually do the bone breaking strength. Same thing with the sheep that we're using. They're destined for the food chain anyway. And it actually works out good that we can do all this exercise work with them and do these things. And then they go to our meat lab, get processed, we get our samples, and we still use the product. Um, I I understand there are people that actually do terminal horse studies, and I get it, and I think it can be extremely useful. I'm not knocking it. I don't know that I would enjoy doing that work, and I know my students would enjoy doing that work. And it's actually sad you grow attached to these animals anyway, but it was that same endpoint where, but we feel like we can actually make some huge impacts for horses by being able to actually look at these tissues, whether it's joint or bone. And so in the end, we feel it validates it. So
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. And how cool to be able to do twin studies. I'd never thought about that.
we're
That's
excited. Yes.
and yeah, you could never do that with horses. You'd never find enough twins at the same age and stage and all
Which is
that stuff
really
to
good
be
because
able to do
twin
that.
horses are not a great thing typically. So yeah,
No.
it's a really spoiled situation we are in. So
Hmm. So Brian, just back to the joint supplement thing like this, and I remember when you were telling me that you were doing this research, and I was thinking, oh wow, this is going to be great. And then you presented your paper, Renee, and sent the paper to me, and I read it. And I'm like, wow, this is big. So this is a supplement, and a group of supplements, I guess, a class of supplements that horse owners spend so much money on, and in your beautiful research, you've just showed that it's highly unlikely that these supplements are actually doing anything. What does that mean for horse owners now? What should they do?
I guess I'll tackle this. M- our job is to find out the answers and provide the information. And I also realize it will not change the mind of many people. Just because people love their horses, they're desperate. they may have used it with their horse and they saw their horse seemingly look better. So they say, oh, it had an effect. I get it. I 100% get it. And we cannot say conclusively that it absolutely has no effect. Maybe if you supplemented it for 6 months or a year or something
Mm-mm.
like that, maybe it might have some benefits. Maybe. I don't believe it does. Again, I've actually seen nothing in the literature, and now even with our own work, seen nothing. Again, it actually worked out so wonderfully that the only few little treatment differences that we had benefited or looked like it was the placebo that was better.
Mm.
Because if it was the other way around, you would say, oh, maybe we need to do more work. Because that's what we always say as researchers, or I don't know that our group necessarily does it, but it's a standard line in almost every research paper, more work needs to be done.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm good. I'm good. We gave it the amount of time that they say you should take to get some effects, and we saw nothing. I don't tell people what to do. I tell people what I would do. I would save my money. I've seen
Mm.
nothing that says it's justified to give it. And I guess that's where I would leave that. And realistically, if I were to do something, so much of these last 30 years that I've spent has been trying to figure out better ways to manage our horses. And so many of our joint problems have developed because of how we've dealt with our horses. We lunge our horses, we do lots of circles, we stall our horses, all these things that actually cause joint problems. We need to change the way we manage our horses, change the way we train our horses. But then we don't have as many of these problems. Once you have them, there is no good cure. Again, Renee's working on corticosteroids, and then people can use those to hide the problem. They don't cure the problem.
Mm.
Sometimes maybe if you have an old horse, you want to make them a little bit more comfortable. Sure, I get it. It's not a good, in my opinion, treatment for a young active horse that you want to keep doing stuff with. I've had some shoulder injuries. Doctors wanted to inject my shoulder. I said no, because I'm stupid. You make my shoulder feel good, and I'm going to do really stupid things with it. I want it to hurt, so I
Mm.
don't do as much stuff. So there's a lot of ethical things horse owners need to think about. We want to make our horses comfortable, but don't make your horses comfortable. Fool yourself into thinking they're cured when they're not.
Mm.
And even with these joint supplements, I think we can still cause damage if we believe it's making a difference. Because
That's an
I
interesting point.
remember as an exercise rider, trainers would do something to the horse and they're, I'm out there galloping. Hey, Brian, what do you think? Does it feel better? I'm like, well, okay, maybe. Because they're telling me they just spent a lot of money on this. The horse should feel better. Could I really tell any difference? No, I'm just lollygagging out there singing songs. I have no idea. I'm not feeling any difference. But if you're telling me it should be getting better, I'm going to believe it's feeling better. And then we might do something stupid with the horse. So I guess my opinion is don't believe anecdotal evidence and keep your money in your wallet.
Mm. Actually, just on the anecdotal evidence, and I want to come back and ask you, Renee, that if people are focused on joint supplements, what else are they missing, and what else could they be doing that would better support joint health? But just on the anecdotal evidence, I'd be really interested to know with the ruminants. So you've shown that in the sheep that the rumen pretty much destroyed the joint supplement before it could be absorbed, so it was never absorbed. But on the forums with people talking about they feed it to their show goats and their show sheep, were they saying it made a difference?
Yeah, that's kind of what the conversation that you sort of like pick up on is, people asking for recommendations, or even if they just have a pet that they're wondering if they should try it. Sometimes you'll see kind of some encouragement. I don't feel that like the sheep community has reached the level of the horse community in terms of like, sharing their success stories. Um,
Yeah.
but you definitely see that people are sharing that, like, they've tried it, they feel it helps,
Mm.
and again, maybe they're using something different than what we tested. Again, we can always, harp on people for overstating their results, and we can do it in the other way too. I think we need to like make sure we like stay within our bounds, right? As to like what we can officially conclude, whether or not we think anything else would matter is a matter of opinion. But yeah, it looks like people with any animal just want something to work. Um, and I think people are used to, well, we feed it to our horses, we feed it to our dogs. I take a supplement. So then they look at the animal in their backyard and they're like, well, you probably need it too. And they're willing to try, you
Mm.
know? That kind of seems to be like the level of where it's at. And I don't think there are a lot of uh, ruminant based joint products that I've come across in comparison again to like the horses and the dogs and the people. So it does seem like there are people using things designed not for use in ruminant, just off label, which again, very unlikely to cause any harm. Um, but it actually looks like it may have less of a chance of working in a ruminant than it does in a horse. So
So what are we missing, Renee? So for so focused on using a joint supplement and believing that that's what you need to do to help your horse. Like there must be. I mean, as a nutritionist, I know there's other things we can do, but what are we missing as a horse community that things that will help or could help joint health that is not based around joint supplements?
yeah. Um, I mean, I think we kind of touched I think absolutely the way we manage our horses can make a difference. I also think that if I had the perfect answer here today, we would have already solved the issue of arthritis long ago. Because there is some again, that kind of feeling of inevitability. We keep these horses along for a very long time. And there's still kind of some questions as to like how and when these things develop. Um, but I think really as has been established with bone, I mean like my goal would be to like take your baton and like move on to the cartilage and be like, okay, like how do we make sure that we set these horses up for success in the same way that we have, yeah, done with the skeleton. We know that cartilage and its supporting structures are mechanosensitive. We know that like putting stress on it promotes some development, but we don't know nearly as much or in as much detail as we do with bone. It's a lot more difficult to really like track progress of cartilage in comparison to like ways that you can assess bone without having to euthanize animals. So I absolutely think that that is part of it. Um but I think kind of a good take home message is that like these supplements I don't think are going to do the heavy lifting for you. And so if you are partaking in management practices that are likely to be doing your horse's joints harm, but you're giving a joint supplement to like balance things out, I would not assume there to be any balance there. And I think
Mm.
people kind of think of joints as just like it's a joint. Like that's what it is. And I think people are much more familiar with the idea of like training muscle almost. And if you thought about a joint very loosely as the way you would think about like training a muscle is like you need your rest days. You can only push it so far so fast, but you still need to like maintain activity to keep things healthy. You can't, you know, lock your horse away and them not have free movement and expect them to have healthy joints. So there's just a lot of things I think that go into general horse management that when we implement these things, like ensuring they have a lot of access to pasture, we're exercising them safely and appropriately when they're young. Um, that seems to be good for the joints and the mind and the skeleton and the digestive tract. And, like there's all of these things that I think it might just kind of tie into almost everything else that I don't think you can
Mm.
get away with, you know, pushing a joint too hard or working your horse too hard and expect something else to negate the damage you might be doing. And
Yeah.
especially,
Yep.
I think once you see arthritis set in, it is progressive. There is no cure for it. We have yet to see anything that even like can, stop it. Like, so it really, I think, matters a lot when these horses are young as to how they get handled. Like even at camp, we've had a 10-year-old reigning prospect be delivered to us because everybody else has deemed this horse useless because his joints were just shot at 10. And
Yeah.
for almost any
Yeah.
discipline, like that's often before a horse may peak in their career. That's not to say anybody in particular did something wrong. I'm sure there's absolutely, genetic components and things like that. But I think we need to think of the joint as a bit more dynamic than what it historically like has been. I think
Mm.
owners need to make sure that they're taking responsibility for their horse's joint health with their actions the way they do for the rest of their horse's health and advocate for that and not
Mm.
hope that like the magic product on the shelf can,
Yeah.
pick up that slack for them.
Mm. It's such a good point. And the reality is that I'm going to speak as a nutritionist here. Like your joint health starts in utero, and in fact, probably prior to in utero. Like the health of the mare, we know has an impact on the joint health of her foal. And there was a cool study done in New Zealand many years ago now, where they showed that copper deficient mares had foals that had a much higher incidence of OCD, and it didn't matter how much you supplemented those foals with copper, you could not fix the damage that was done in utero. So if you've got a horse that was born to a mare whose nutrition during pregnancy was suboptimal, then maybe the damage is already done. We don't know that, but that's my guess as a nutritionist. And it's interesting. I've got two of my horses. I have 7 horses, Renee. Goodness knows why, but I have 7 horses, and but 2 of them, they're like family heirlooms, I call them. So one of them is 22 years old, and he's the foal of the horse that I had as an 8-year-old kid. I'm closer to 50 than I am 40 now. So, uh, that genetics has been around for a long time with me. And his mum was reared. We got her as a 6-month-old racing quarter horse weanling. The racing quarter horse industry essentially had shut down back in the 80s in Australia, and there was nowhere for these horses to go. And I still remember my dad walking into the bathroom saying, "Found you a horse." I was 8. "Found you a horse, Nerida." It was a 6-month-old quarter horse weanling. And I look back now and go, "Did you not like me?" Anyway, I rode her from when she was like a rising 2-year-old as a 9-year-old kid, and she was a just unbelievably crazy, amazing horse, and I still to this day, and I don't think a horse will ever surpass her in my life because she was so unbelievable. But she was crippled in her early 20s with arthritis, like cracky, creaky, lame, like horrible to ride because she was so wobbly, because her gait was so unbalanced because she was so sore all the time. And her son, who I bred, and she was fed properly through pregnancy, and he's been on a balanced diet his whole life. And granted, he hasn't done nearly as much work as his mother, and that's always going to be a confounding factor, and I will never know the effect of that. She wasn't supplemented ever until I knew what I was doing. So, until she was like 17, 18, she wasn't fed properly either. And he, no sign, 22-year-old, and I ride him and he's just still got the most beautiful floating canter, and, there's just no sign of arthritis in him. And then another one, the same story, got the mare when I was younger. She was never supplemented, was a potty-red foal, also like even worse arthritis than Coco, the other mare, and I have her foal as well. She's 15 now, but again, no signs of arthritis, and she has done a lot of work.
Yeah.
Like lots of jumping, eventing, and, so... And I see it a lot on thoroughbred breeding farms too, when we get their diet as right as we can, we just don't see the joint issues. And when a farm gets their diet really wrong, there's joint issues. Like we have some farms that I've worked with over the years, more than 50% of their foals have OCD lesions. Like it's dramatic. And it all, that comes down to nutrition, and then we're trying to fix that later in life with a supplement. It's just like you say, so much of it comes down to other things, and not this sort of a magic bullet
Hmm.
for the joints. Anyway, I had to throw that in there because there's so much comes back to not and I guess it's with all supplements too. Rather than trying to fix a hoof problem with biotin, it's more than likely copper and zinc deficiency. And then we go and put biotin in there, and you're trying to fix a copper and zinc deficiency with biotin. You need to have the rest of the diet fixed to fix the problem, and not rely on a supplement. But
Narrative. One thing that your history there highlights is, if they would have these issues with other livestock species, they would probably have it figured out, because one, generation intervals are much quicker and all that stuff, and there's so much more money for research, et cetera, et cetera. But we are the ones that keep our horses for their life, or and you mentioned that, and like this is spanning like your whole life with like two
mm,
generations of a horse, so yeah,
mm-hmm.
it's great that we do have them for so long, that we get to see him get old. We don't want to see him get old, but it happens, and our goal is to try and make their elder years, or in some cases, like you mentioned the 10-year-old there, Renee. We want to make those lives as pleasant as possible, regardless of the age.
And I think that's what this really comes down to, is let's not lose those horses in the prime of their life because of management, and the way we treat them. I love to take people back to the evolutionary timescale of a horse, and remind everyone that we've been in horses' lives for 0.01% of their time on Earth. Like it's a blip, and they've gone from these free roaming animals who, they were never asked to stand still for near 24 hours a day in a stall ever. And that must have an impact on their joints, where their joint surfaces are just immobile and pushing
Definitely.
on one another. Is that
Yep.
am I
Oh,
right? Am I thinking there?
especially like cartilage is avascular, and it needs its nutrients by actually having mobility. I always like to compare it to a sponge. You squish down, you release. You put a sponge in a little pan of water. You push down, the water goes out. You release, it goes in, out, and
Ah,
that's how cartilage is nourished. And when you're
yeah,
standing
wow.
still, no mobility, it's not getting proper nourishment. So I do think that
That is fascinating.
getting stuck in a stall for long periods of time, and something that just about every horse owner knows that has horses in stalls, is that you run the risk of them stocking up when they're kept in a stall.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't
Mm-hmm.
happen when they're out. And not that that deals with cartilage, but that just tells you the importance of horses moving around. So
Mm, mm.
whether we want to admit it or not, exercise is a good thing. So
That's I didn't know that about cartilage. But just that description of it is beautiful, to say that, they need the movement to move nutrients in and out. I
yeah,
mean, you think about how many, particularly in the States, how many horses are in stalls and not
way too
moving.
many. Yes, exactly.
Mm.
So this is a good reason for you to run a marathon, Narada.
See, I always maintain that humans are not meant to run marathons, and we would wear our joints out, and that's why I don't do it. I'm looking after my joints.
But I do not think running marathons is good for joints. With joints, there's this happy medium. No exercise is bad, and really strenuous, is bad. So it's somewhere in the middle. So you're probably doing it. You're probably doing it right.
So we've just thrown an awful lot of information into this space. So for both of you, I'll go to you, Renee, first. What is the simplest advice you would give horse owners to help them look after their horse's joints?
That's a really good question. I would say to just treat the joint like any other aspect of your horse's health. And yeah, don't trust one thing to do the magic. It takes just as much work to maintain as any other part of your horse does.
Mm-hmm. So practically, how does that? So, like I was saying, like the right amounts of exercise and the right nutrition, and
Yeah, I think it's really just like, I don't know that there's like one little thing that you could do, but I think if you are following our, appropriate management guidelines, right? We're giving our horses access to pasture. We are not we're not putting like strenuous force onto our horses' joints. We're acclimating to their exercise regimens appropriately. All of those recommendations that people give you are there for a reason, and I think that is what is going to protect you in the long run and protect your horse in the long run.
Mm-hmm. And Brian, anything to add to
Yeah.
that? Just simple advice.
So I'll take it one step further regarding like circular exercise. And again, I understand why people lunge horses. Or to me, a reasonable reason to lunge your horse is because you don't want to die. If you want to do it because you're afraid to get on them because they're going to buck you off, that's okay. I accept that. What I do not think is acceptable is you do it because, well, that's just what you do with a horse before you ride them. There is zero logic on that. And what I tell my students on a very practical basis is go out to the diameter of the circle, go out to the circumference that you would lunge your horse in, and try and run as fast as you lunge your horse. And um, my screen just gave me a thumbs up for some reason. Anyway, because I guess my story is correct. That's why I was doing it. But go out there, try and run as fast as you lunge your horse. The odds are you probably can't do it. And feel if you feel any torque in your hip, your knees, or your ankles. If you do that, and you're just doing it for like 15 seconds, because you're probably not going to run that far, that long. Think about what the damage is you're doing every single day that you do that. And the odds are your horse is going faster than you. Again, I'm not saying you should never do it. There is a time and a place. I have no problem with it. But we've just accepted it as part of the training thing. I'm going to guess there are not many horses that are housed on pasture that may get all kinds of exercise, but not circular exercise and not real fast, hard stops. I'm going to guess most of them don't really have joint problems. We create a lot of our joint problems. I can't talk about Australia, but in the US, obesity is a huge issue, not only with our human population, who also have joint problems, but with our horse population. And think about how much force you're putting on the joints. So many of the things that cause joint problems, it's because of what we do with our horses. And I don't blame people until they've been educated. Once they understand that, and then they still do it, shame on you. If you don't know, that's okay. We all learn, and until somebody points it out to us. Because I look at all the things that I was taught growing up with horses that I thought were right, because somebody older than me and more experienced told me it was the right way to do it. And it wasn't until somebody came along and pointed out, or the science came along and pointed out, that's like, no, that's a bad idea. I was like, yeah, you know what? Never thought about that. So I don't blame people unless they've been told, unless they've been informed, and then they ignore it. And then shame on you and your horse is suffering.
I think all of that really it ties in well with what I was trying to say about you need to put in the work, be able to answer the question what you are doing for your horse's joint health the way you could answer a question about the rest of their health. And if you don't know, or if your only answer is that you're turning to a supplement or you give them maintenance injections, that is your sign that maybe you are due for a little bit more learning, and you maybe need to look at the rest of how you're managing your horse and see if that is servicing your horse's joints appropriately.
And it's similar like so many gut health supplements on the market at the moment, and some of them are amazing. In fact, a lot of them are amazing. But I say to people, if you're leaving your horse for long periods without forage to chew on, and you're working your horse on an empty stomach and not feeding hay before you ride, and you're feeding a high grain diet, using a gut supplement is like using a garden hose to put out a bushfire. like it, or a wild, what do you call it? What do you guys call them? Wildfires? We
Yeah,
call them
but
bushfires.
bushfire, we know what you meant.
um,
We, we, we
yeah.
can speak Aussie. So,
Yeah. But it literally is, like you're going out there with your piddly little garden hose trying to put out a wildfire, because there's so much else that is feeding the issue. So I think what you're saying, Renee, is, if you've got an obese horse that's standing around in a stall for, 23 and a half hours a day and is maybe on a suboptimal diet that's not helping not supporting joint health from a nutrition perspective, feeding a joint supplement is like that garden hose.
Yeah, exactly.
Even if they did work,
Yeah. Yeah. No.
even if it was an effective supplement, it would still be like the garden hose.
Yeah. And I even, which is, I mean, just a short anecdote, but there's, I won't say the name of the company because that feels a little too dirty, but you can go onto YouTube and there is a very popular company from which people can order a wide variety of supplements. And they kind of have these little like management series. The advice that was given was the best gift that you could give someone who is just starting their horse into training is a joint supplement.
Oh, wow.
And that's just kind of like the idea of, there's a whole host of things that you need to do with your horse's management, like diet, activity, weight, like all of these things play into the joint like it does every other aspect of the horse's health. And I think people are really familiar with like the dynamics of the rest of the horse and they kind of feel like, yeah, like the joint is the joint. It is what it is. And it is avascular and it can be a bit unforgiving and hard to change, but we do know for a fact that is dynamic. We probably just need to take a bit of a protective approach rather than like a retrospective and repair approach for this particular tissue. Um, but it's also kind of the advice that people are given sometimes is, the supplement will take care of everything. And then the things that maybe do really matter or might make a difference from the start kind of fall to the wayside or don't become a priority because people don't know.
Yeah, it's such a good point. And once you pigeonhole your mind into thinking that way, it's really hard to pull it back out again if that's what you initially believed was going to work. So we're going to need to wrap this up. But so one question on your future direction, Renee, because I'd really love to know where you're headed to from here. And then we'll go down to our clear round questions. So what is next for you, Renee? Like I've just absolutely loved listening to you speak today, and you do such a beautiful job of explaining your research, and you've done such a beautiful job together with Ryan and the rest of your team on this research. So what's next for you?
Well, I really appreciate that. That really means a lot to me because I was a bit nervous. I was like, oh my gosh, what if I sound silly? Whatever.
No, you've done a beautiful job.
Thank you. I think next is also a very loaded question. It depends on if we're talking, next week or next year or whatever. But in the order of timeline, we have about one more study that we for sure have lined up, and then hopefully, actually finish the PhD is always the goal, right? But career-wise, I think at this point I'd really love to stay in academia somewhere. I really enjoy this research environment, but beyond this area of research, which hopefully has come through today, that I really love and am passionate about and want to continue on in, but I absolutely have developed such a love for like teaching and mentoring students. I love going out to the farm with my undergrads. They're so fun. And I've had a lot of opportunity to teach, be a teaching assistant for a lot of different courses. This upcoming year, I get to be a co-advisor for one of our undergraduate clubs in our department. And so that's a huge aspect too that I just really love is being able to educate people and kind of, I think, really like rounding out everything we've talked about is I think working in academia, being able to do this research, but then have this direct link to communicate the results of that research to like the immediate next generation of upcoming professionals is just so phenomenal, and there's really, like, no point in doing research if you can't disseminate that information, right?
Mm. Hmm.
And having this environment where you're doing the research and you're, like, teaching students and young professionals all at the same time is such, like, an amazing environment to be a part of, and so, yeah, I would really like to stay in academia after I hopefully graduate.
Well, I really, really hope you do, because with wonderful people like Brian nearing retirement, it makes me so happy to know that there's people like you, Renee, who are going to move through and fill like it's big shoes to fill, but I have no doubt that you will be able to fill them, and it's just so awesome that you've been there to mentor as well, Brian, and bring this next generation of academics through. It's awesome,
I would
wonderful.
feel a lot less comfortable retiring if there weren't people like Renee around to take on the torch and carry it on. I have 100% confidence that the education, the research, all that stuff it'll be in great hands with people like her. It
Mm.
would be hard to find a better final grad student. So
Yeah,
it's been a
yeah,
pleasure.
and I know you can only hear Renee, but I can see Renee on Zoom, and she said, I hope the passion comes across the whole time she's been speaking. Your eyes have been bright and like leaning forward, and I know you can hear the passion because it's in your voice, but
Oh,
yeah, you can
wait! I got a comment.
absolutely see.
So leaning forward is important because my chair actually broke during this because I always lean backwards. So I've had to lean forward because this chair.
Wow, it really is broken. That's hilarious.
I guess
I thought you were just really, really excited and engaged, Brian.
maybe that's but next time I'll try to be more passionate and lean forward, and then I won't break my chairs.
Righto, clear round, no refusals. Are you ready, Renee and Brian?
Yes.
Sure.
Righto. So Brian's already answered this question, Renee. So this one's all yours. What is your all-time favorite horse-related book or movie?
Okay, so picking one is so difficult, but I would honestly have to say Spirit, the animated
Mm.
horse movie. Um
I love it.
I think it is one of those things that, like, I can show anyone and they enjoy it. I think it has a really, like, great metaphor running throughout for adults to enjoy, but it's just so nostalgic. As a runner-up, though, I have to give a shameless plug to the horse camp movies because I would be doing a disservice without them. But Black River Farm and Ranch actually, I think, has like 5 films that
Oh,
were
wow.
yeah, filmed, like, on their property that are, yeah, kind of, like, based around the camp lifestyle. They're definitely for children, and they're not necessarily a, like, star-studded event per se, but they are a lot of fun, and we've had kids, honestly, from all over the world. We've had campers from Germany, Australia, France, that have come to Croswell, Michigan because they saw the horse camp movie and insisted that they needed to go to horse camp.
Wow.
So,
Oh,
yeah,
wow. We'll have to ask their permission to put a link to the ranch. I mean, people can Google it, but put a link to the ranch in the show notes for this podcast. I'd love to do that. I'm going to go and check it out as well. So, question for both of you, and Brian, you can go first on this one. What's one myth about joint care that you wish would vanish forever?
That corticosteroids cure the problem. Because again, I look at most racehorse owners, and that's my real passion is the racing industry, very much care for their animals. But I absolutely believe that the very few but notable catastrophic breakdowns that we have, almost invariably the horse has been injected with corticosteroids shortly before
Mm.
the race. And that makes the horse not feel the pain, the inflammation disappears. It looks like the joint is cured. You can't cure a joint in a day or two. And if you're having
Mm.
to inject a joint or even give these supplements, you're probably admitting you have a problem. And if you have a problem, you shouldn't be racing your horse.
That's a great one. And you, Renee, what's one myth you wish would disappear forever?
I don't know if it's so much a myth as I would say a habit, but I get very frustrated when horses come with normal maintenance. And people are referencing injections or like needing their joint supplement, or they need the chiro out and the massage and the PEMF and all of the fancy things. I think sometimes referring to these like magic bullets that we've discussed as being like regular maintenance really normalizes like the degradation of the joint, which again, it happens to a lot of horses, but it makes it feel like something people are like powerless to control. You should just accept it. They're gonna need their injections and this, that, and the other. I think it, um, makes people take it a bit less seriously when when it's expected or considered normal for horses to do things.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. I love that one. And then Renee, again, Brian's already, I think you said secretariat to
I
this.
did.
You did. Yeah,
I know what the question
and
is.
that's on podcast 4 if anyone wants to go, and I really recommend you do go and listen to that podcast about bone health, because it is, if you haven't heard the science behind what actually keeps bones healthy, you really, really need to go and listen to that podcast, because there's so much good information in there that will keep your horse also sound into the future. But Renee, if you could ride any horse, past or present, who would it be?
All right, I think I would have to go with somebody present, and I think it would be Bruno, who is, I don't know if you're familiar with this horse, in training and being shown by Boyd Martin, who is kind of a name I think a lot of people would know, whether or not you're like in the eventing space. I think this horse, I just absolutely love the story behind it. They have a huge social media following, so I think it would be fun to, like bridge that connection with some non-horse people who might recognize the name or be familiar with the story of this horse. Um, and I also really love that group, even with these 5-star eventers, these Olympic athletes, they do a really great job of like showing their horses being horses. And I think that would be like a phenomenal team to, form a connection with, if that were.
Oh, and how amazing would it be to ride an eventing horse at that level?
Right,
Oh.
absolutely.
By the way, Nerida,
Yes, Brian.
I would like to actually change my answer. I know I said
Oh,
secretariat last time, but with new information, the horse I would really like to ride is Spirit, the animated version.
Oh, do you know that might actually be possible if we could get them to also animate you and put you on Spirit?
Oh,
My daughter could actually do that. She would. I'll ask her.
please do that. Yes, I'd be living the dream.
Oh, that would be so funny. And actually, when you said Spirit before, Renee, all I could think of was, oh my goodness, Tamaya, my daughter, is just going to go, I need to meet Renee. And she'd love to see you again, Brian. So we'll have to sort that out.
Absolutely.
And then last question before we hit the 2-hour mark on this podcast, my goodness, is if you had 2 minutes with every horse owner in the world, what would you tell them? It can be about joint health, or it can be about other management, or anything about horses. But I'll go to you first, Renee.
I really think I would. Oh my goodness, what would I want to tell them? I think in 2 minutes, I think I would really want people to think about treating their horse like a horse and not a like crystal figurine of a horse. I think is really an important aspect, because yeah, I think again when we bubble wrap them, not only for their joint, but I know you guys talked about this in your bone podcast as well, your bone episode, is that sometimes when we bubble wrap them, we do so much more harm than good. And like you were talking with how these horses evolved to be, sometimes it's better to just let them be how they are than it is to, try and protect them from.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And you, Brian?
I'm going to echo a lot of the same sentiments. One, we always have to be an advocate for the horse. I mean, you have to put their welfare above everything, I would say. oftentimes we forget that they are a living, caring, breathing individual who experiences pain and good days and bad days and things like that. And often we get upset when things don't go exactly as we had hoped they would, but they are still a living individual that has emotions and feelings and fear and happiness and all that. I know that's me putting my emotions into them, but anybody who hangs around horses, how can you deny that? And then along with what Renee's saying is, yeah, oftentimes we do what we think is best for the horse, but it's not the best. A little side thing, and maybe we'll have to do another podcast here in a 6 months. Working with an individual, Renee's been out to this place out in Wyoming where they're taking race horses that have reached the end of their racing career and have lots of issues, and they're turning them out into a 2,500 acre ranch in Wyoming. And they talk about how, wow, they seem to do great. Now, it takes a little bit because what a change in life. And after we finished up with our Equine Science Society symposium, myself, my lab group, and actually some of my former lab group, we went and visited, and such a unique setting. And a lot of us who have our very babied, pampered show horses might think they would never handle it or they wouldn't like it. And some of them, I'm sure, would be in shock a little bit as to, wow, what is this? But it's kind of a neat little thing to see. And the study that we're going to be doing is looking at whether or not how they actually change and whether they're beneficial versus horses that have come off a similar type background, but just going to like small paddocks. Stay tuned. Episode in the future. So.
Yeah, wow, that'll be fascinating, and we would definitely have. I'd love to have both of you back on. Thank you so much for all of your knowledge that you have shared today, and in such a beautiful, passionate way, the way that you always do, Brian. And I can see that you are you're just perfect together to work together, because you share that passion and also that scientific rigor and integrity, which I love. I've always loved that about your work, Brian, and I can see that absolutely in you too, Renee. So we've gone through a lot, but it will hopefully help a lot of horses and their owners. And until next time, just big gratitude to you both, and we will talk to you again soon.
Sounds great. Thanks for having us with us, Nerida.
Yes, thank you so much.
Wasn't that a great conversation? We honestly could have kept going for hours. Huge thanks to Brian and Renee for sharing so much about their research on joint supplements, and for giving us a peek behind the scenes at how they ran that study. The two big takeaways here are that we've still got a lot to learn about these products, and until the research catches up, we need to be smart, evidence-based owners who don't believe marketing and instead seek out products backed by robust, high-quality science. And the second takeaway is that joint health is so much more than a supplement. Good nutrition, the right amount and type of exercise and movement, proper weight control, and correct hoof care all play an important role in joint health. And we must not, as horse owners, neglect any of these in favour of using a supplement to fix or prevent problems. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you hit subscribe, and we'd love it if you shared it with your horse-loving friends. And of course, if you want to make sure your horse's diet is actually supporting healthy joints, head to myhappy.horse. We'll help you figure out exactly what your horse needs, what's worth feeding, and what's not. Thanks for listening, and as always, keep your horses happy, healthy, and moving.